we were just chatting about meeting in person when you were just moving back to the Bay Area 3 years ago at our mutual friend, Erin Misako Wilkins' Asian American Herbalism book launch
Hmm.
in Sonoma County. So it's really good to see your face again, even though we've chatted on the phone since. Okay, you're moving stuff around. Good. So, Lauren, thank you again for joining. We have our budding entrepreneurs here who mostly are herbalists. Some people are doing other healing modalities, but generally around plant wisdom. So, your experience as an entrepreneur is vital to hear your journey. And thank you again for sharing your journey with us today. I would just love to get started to hear your origin story, if you don't mind, because I think a lot of people here, especially, might be in a similar origin space right now that you were at many years ago at this point. But I would just love to
Many.
hear it. And I don't know if I've ever actually heard ever your true herbal origin story. So I would love for you to share if possible.
Yeah, thanks. I'm happy to be here. It's exciting that you have this group, and yeah, so nice to meet you guys, see your faces. So I'm Lauren Haynes. I'm the founder of Wooden Spoon Herbs. I've been an herbalist for like 14 years, and I've had my business for just over 11. Um, my herbal origin story is kind of lifelong. As a kid, I was really, really obsessed with nature and plants and animals and caring for them and healing them. And like, I think a lot of, kids want to be veterinarians when they grow up, when they like learn that's a career they can have. But I was like, okay, I'm going to go to this school. It's in Denver. It's like integrative medicine for animals. This is in like 1995, just like really had it all laid out. And I was really fascinated by plants, didn't have any concept of herbalism. And kind of like as I got older, I was really interested in like, actually, it was through PETA that I found I had this like PETA mix CD. We're going really deep. We're going so this is like the full answer. But I had this like PETA mix CD and it was all of these like Bay Area punk bands. It was like a Fat Records compilation. And so that kind of opened a gateway for me into like that kind of music world and like DIY music and house shows and that kind of thing. And so that was kind of like what my adolescence and like teenage years were spent doing, like really involved in like feminism and those circles. And through that kind of community, I started working in like small food businesses. So I worked in a bakery and a cafe and all of these really small independent businesses that really taught me like what it looks like to have a community in a workplace and really be working like as a team to accomplish a like goal that we all believe in. And so then like I worked at a bakery, I was doing their farmers market booth. I started getting to know all the farmers. I started hanging out with the farmers. The farmers are all into fermentation. And I don't know if you guys know Sandor Katz, one of the like premier fermentation kind of revivalists from like the early 2000s, but he lives in Middle Tennessee. So he actually gave his first class on like fermenting vegetables ever at this little gathering called Food for Life at this kind of like Skillshare permaculture farm that I was familiar with and had friends who like lived at, went to, and my conservation biology teacher in college, it was like her family's property. So I got into fermentation, and from there foraging, and from there started seeing the word medicinal popping up, with my like violets and my chickpeas and my cleavers. Medicinal, 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 still didn't really click. But then I got a job at a health food store and really started to just like explore on my break like the supplement section and see the tincture bottles and kind of go home and like research my list of names. And through that I really realized, oh, plants can do XYZ soup to nuts healing activity in the body. And it was just a light switch. And I just like bought the whole section at my favorite used bookstore on herbalism. And that was a lot of like rosemary and Susan Weed and Robin Rose Bennett, all the classics. And that was kind of the spark. but it was really kind of like a whole lifelong journey that synthesized in that moment of like, ah, this is what I'm like meant for.
My computer screen was off for a second. Apologies. Amazing. I love that you went from health food store. We actually have a very similar time where I was working a lot in health food stores. My very first herbal store was at an herbal apothecary when I was 21. And I had worked at herb stores before that. There's such great education centers and people
Mhm.
there. They're so eager to share and learn information. Any advice that I give people when they want to get started, I said, get a job at an herb store. It actually was
Mhm.
one of the best educational opportunities. Actually, Matthew Wood says that as well. He was working at an herbal apothecary for 10 years before he
Oh, wow.
started seeing clients and working with people. So it's just a great opportunity to really get your feet wet, see what's out there
Hmm.
about it, which makes sense that you started this product company. So let's fast
Hmm.
forward. So you went and did all the self-study, and then
I
you
did.
were formally studied as or you studied formally at a clinical herbal medicine school. Can you share that? And then where Wooden Spoon shows up for you?
Yeah, wooden switch shows up first before I go to school for herbalism formally, but I was doing a lot of self-study and I was selling, so I started making stuff, in my kitchen, like for myself and my friends, and a lot of it was like really terrible beginner mistake herbalism, like where I put 20 plants in one tincture because the book said they're all anti-spasmodic and it didn't do anything. And kind of learn like the elegance of formulation and like what I resonate with and like what herbs are kind of my herbs, and was really, really just gravitating towards weedy herbs and also like native plants and plants that people were growing on the farms, like at the farmers market. So I kind of like I hung my shingle at the farmers market, the Main Street Farmers Market in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where I'm from. And that was another way that I really got to know people and really got to understand what people were struggling with, how they talked about herbs, what their comfort level was. And I just was making all kinds of things. I was making tiny batches of seasonal ingredients from my garden, from things I was like wild crafting, like all weedy things I was wild crafting. And so I was making flower essences, I was making oxymels, I was making tea blends and powder blends, and really just was curious what people wanted. Like I had no agenda. I was just kind of doing my thing and seeing what happened. And it was really beautiful. And I remember I had a few client or like few customers who would come back every week and the first week she came, she said, I have debilitating migraines. They send me home from work 3 days a week. Big problem, big responsibility. But I also had grown up suffering from migraines, and I had some insight, and I actually formulated the tea one day inside a migraine for her. I like made one and it worked for me. And I was like, okay, well, we'll see what happens. And so I gave it to her, and she was like, she came back the next week and she was like, I didn't go home at all, not one day. So that was a really beautiful experience. And I also started to understand sourcing because I was talking to farmers and I was understanding what they were bringing, maybe what they had on their farm, what they considered like nuisances, right? Like burdock roots that they were happy for me to come dig. So I did a lot of that. I did a lot of traveling around and digging plants and harvesting plants on people's property that they either didn't want or graciously kind of shared with me. Um, and that was kind of how I was sourcing. And then with all of that, and that's kind of the first year, we can like look at the first year. I was still working, I was waiting tables, I had a contract herbalism job through one of my customers at the restaurant who did like gut health coaching, and I made bitters for her and learned a lot about production and shipping and scaling production from her. Um, but I was just working a lot. I was just doing all of the things. And then I ended up deciding to try my hand at like doing only wooden spoon the second year. And so I decided I needed to formalize my education. And I went to the Appalachian Center for Natural Health, which is the school of Phyllis Light in North Central Alabama. And I did that I did 3 full years with her.
I really love her work. So thank you for bringing Phyllis Light into our conversation today. You are clearly a hustler. I think you and I have that in common where it's like we'll be willing to do whatever it takes to get something kind of into its fruition. But all of that experience that you shared, the shipping, all the different jobs that you had, which all seemingly informed, which is true for anyone, all informs us for how do we create a company that's successful. I'm curious that what skill set you think has helped you. I'm fast forwarding a little bit and we'll go back to some kind of the origin of Wooden Spoon. But in this span of 14 years of being an herbalist and having Wooden Spoon, or having Wooden Spoon for 14 years, is that correct?
11. Yeah.
11 years, 11 years having Wooden Spoon.
Mm.
Being an herbalist for 14 years. In that span of 11 years, what would you say has attributed to your personal success and resilience in the face of running a business?
I mean, I think it's the same. Like, I don't resonate with the word hustler or even that identity, but I feel like I'm definitely incredibly passionate. And I feel like that is what has made all of this happen. Like, and I don't say that from a like, wave a wand fairy tale way. I say that from like there are parts of running a business that aren't fun, that really challenge anyone, that really challenge me, but I'm very driven and I'm not afraid to work long hours in service of something I care about. And also I also was really young, I mean, not really young, I was 25 and I didn't have like my work was kind of the focal point of my life at that time. And that gave me a lot, and living in Tennessee, right? Low cost of living, like all of these factors really kind of gave me the opportunity to do whatever I needed to do. Like, for example, I'm saying that because I didn't pay myself for like the first 8 of 11 years. You know what I mean? And I like I paid my bills, I paid my rent from the like, income of the business, but I didn't take a salary for 8 of 11 years. And um but it was that passion. But it's just like I'm having so much fun. I'm making so many friends. Every win is like so fulfilling because it's truly like my self-expression. It's like such a passion project. It's a labor of love. And I think that is like if you don't have that, I mean, unless there are businesses that are necessities, right? We have banks and laundromats and all kinds of things in the world. But I think for a creative business, you have to have that just like burning fire inside you to be like, this is amazing. I'm going to do this. I'm going to tell everyone. And I also didn't tell everyone. I'm quite shy about it. But at the same time, like, I think, yeah, we'll get into it. But I would say passion and and capacity, passion and capacity. I had
Mm.
a lot more capacity then.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. There's a personality too that fits well with that passionate journey of working long hours and working many jobs to figure it out. And
Hmm.
I truly believe that even people who need a lot of self-care time and not process working time still can have a very successful business, but it might take a little longer for them to have that, like you said, capacity.
But I think that's great because I think the thing that makes businesses
Yeah.
successful or work is like, especially 11 years in, having a, much bigger business than I imagined. Success to me isn't, it means something very different. And I think if you can set yourself up from the beginning to really live in symbiosis with your creation and livelihood, then that's really more successful than anything. Like that's really what it's all about. It's just finding something that truly sustains and supports and feels good, feels doable. Because we can get into it, but yeah, I reached a point where I reached many, many, many points where it was not sustainable. But then but at this point, it's like you have to draw the line. And I'm 30, almost 37, and it's just like, yeah, I'm not interested in living that life anymore. And so yeah, there's many phases and seasons, but
I was reading an article about modern day investment, which you got investors, so I'm excited to talk to you about investment and investors. Um, but modern day companies, CPG companies specifically, which is consumer product goods, for those who don't understand acronyms about business, you don't have to understand them to have this conversation. But CPG is a category of business called consumer product goods, which is tinctures and products that you're in, Lauren. And he was talking about how the new wave is for entrepreneurs to pay themselves and that that can create a more sustainable strategy for that long term. And I like that
Mm-hmm.
awareness, whether it's possible or not at the beginning of your business, that's the big question mark. But I like at least that concept and that awareness of what is sustainable. If it's not paying you, how long can that last? How sustainable can that be energetically, physically? Right. I have
Mm-hmm.
2 kids, for example, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
live in the Bay Area. My costs are high and I am just as equal a breadwinner as my wife. So for me, it's I've always had to make a certain amount of money no matter what I do. And that's where I've created a living standard for myself. So I've had to get more creative with endeavors to make sure I'm making a certain amount of money every month and every year. So there are these different times, like you were saying, different seasons of your life where different sustainability looks different. And it sounds
Mm-hmm.
like for you, sustainability looks very different now than it did 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is a beautiful thing, right? It's like, where is that recalibration of our energies and what is growth? What is enough? What is sustainable for our energetics and our well-being?
Mm-hmm.
So when you started Wooden Spoon and you were out at the farmers market, which is where I encourage a lot of people to start, because I'm so glad that you have that origin story. It makes me so happy because it's the best way to get direct feedback, like you were saying, from your customers, get sourcing, find out what they want, have that direct conversation. You're getting your name out there, you're getting your stuff out there. When did that start? When did you start wanting to expand and grow Wooden Spoon to where it is, even at that first kind of couple years stage of growth?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always followed like, and this kind of is where it aligns with my personal like philosophy, right? Is like there was no outreach happening outside of like showing up at the farmers market. Like that's not fair. So showing up at the farmers market, obviously outreach, putting yourself out there, but I wasn't like shooting for the stars. I was just like following the next crumb, right? Like I was just going on the journey, crumb by crumb. And I actually ended up having an opportunity to move out to a rural area where I got to live on 400 acres in this like little cabin. And so I left the city and it was too far to drive for the farmers market. So that was when I had already gone full time with like, okay, we're gonna make wooden spoon, we're gonna see what happens. And then came the opportunity to move out to this cabin where I mean, this is just a crazy story. It was like really kismet. It was like I prayed for this very specific thing. I clicked on an ad on like Zillow. It wasn't even for sale. The realtor called me and was like, "Oh, my husband has this cabin. You should talk to him." Anyway, long story short, the rent ended up being $175 a month, and I lived there for 6 years. And that's where I built my first. He's a plant person, of course, and he had a greenhouse that him and his wife had a succulent business run out of in the 90s. And so I finished that, and that became our production space. Can you hear me? I froze for a second.
Yeah, it froze for a second, but I think it might have been me. So go ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
So I moved out there and was full time trying to see what happened with Wooden Spoon. And so that's when I decided, okay, well, we're gonna make a website and we're gonna join social media. Um, and try for see what happens with a little more visibility since I'm not going in person to I was also like 2 hours from Atlanta, 2 hours from Nashville, 2 hours from Birmingham, Alabama. So I was like within day trip distance of these places where I could go and kind of like go door to door to all these shops and say like, hey, I have this product and like, are you interested? And here's my story. And like I'm from the local area and that kind of thing. So that was kind of phase 2. Mhm. Oh, and it was like gosh, how big was it? It was a 900 square foot cabin that I was living in and making everything in, and it's very tiny. It was like a corner. There was like a dedicated corner.
So I'm going to ask a question that I'm sure everyone here is curious about the mixed product.
Mhm.
When did you realize you needed to start getting a manufacturing facility from a GMP compliant facility? So you started selling wholesale before you even had the facility.
Mhm.
Yeah. So when
Don't tell anyone.
which I recommend to anyone, but
All those products are expired. But yeah, I would that was 2016, and in 2018 I we built out the studio that we had for that was our shipping warehouse until a year ago ish.
okay.
Um, and so like about 2 years in,
Hmm.
um, it kind of started ramping up. We were getting bigger accounts and bigger accounts. And so we had our own facility that we moved into in 2018 that only lasted a year because once we kind of had space to scale production, we couldn't keep up with demand. We were just inundated with orders. So from there, we actually shifted to a food incubator.
Hmm.
So kind of a commercial kitchen shared space in Asheville. So we would drive 4 hours up to Asheville and like teach them how to make our batches, and then they were our first like co-packer, which is what it's called when you outsource production to someone. It's called a co-packer. And they were our first co-packer, which was a great baby step because we could go supervise the production, we could go do the production if we wanted to. I was still in charge of sourcing, which at the time I was sourcing from like 12 farms. Like all of my materials were coming from 12 farms. I knew the farmers intimately. We like had, contract grows year to year. Like we're ordering like 20, 50 pounds of nettle, catnip, whatever the herbs were. So we were still in control of sourcing. And then that lasted a year before we hit a scale where we were really able to take advantage of kind of the economies of scale. So we were able to order at a certain tier where our price break kind of went down by half. And so then we shifted to one, I mean, long story. So then we shifted to a different co-packer. They went out of business the same month shelter in place happened
Yeah,
with COVID, and then we quickly pivoted. So it's been like one. But now the co-packers we've been with for 5 years, and like really established a deep relationship.
great. Yeah, and it's also called white label or third party manufacturing, which is what you're doing. Or are you the only company that they're packing for?
Well, white label. So white label is when you put your label on their
They're-
products. So we're not doing that.
yeah,
I've formulated all of our products, and then um, what was the last part? Third party.
yeah,
Oh no, we're not the only company.
oh, okay. Yeah, they manufacture many other people's products. Great.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Great. So that's been 5 years. More
Mhm.
than 5 years, you've had other people make your product that are
Mhm.
facilities that can do that legally. What did that look like for your company? So as you grew and started, it sounds like the first thing you did was talk to individual stores and had them buy your product. Can you talk about your first store that you went to,
Mhm.
what you had, what kind of line sheet did you have, what even is a line
Yeah,
sheet, and how you got into that store, and then obviously replicated that?
yeah. So a
Thank
line
you.
sheet is a one-page catalog. It's basically where you put so say you sell tinctures, right? So you sell tinctures, you sell powders, and you sell teas. So those are your three lines. Those are your three product lines, right? So for tinctures, you might have 5 different tinctures. So you have your little tincture heading, for example, this is what we did. You have your tincture heading, and then you have your 5 varieties. You have little pictures of them with the cost that you recommend they sell them for, and then the cost that you will sell them to them for. So your wholesale cost and it's MSRP, manufacturer's suggested retail price. And then you again do that for your powders and for your teas, and then you put a little blurb at the top about your brand and your story. And that's something that you like print out and you leave with people. Digital copies are really common now too, of course. So I had my line sheet, maybe I had my line sheet, but I worked at this cafe called the Farmer's Daughter, and there was a juice bar next door that was like really, I mean, this was 2015, so it was juice bar era. It was superfood juice bar era. And Southern Squeeze, they're still there and they're incredible. And they just opened a clean beauty shop called The Living Well, and they're just like delicious, fantastic. But they had just opened. And so I remember I had like a little bottle. I have no idea what it was. It was probably, I was making a lot of like love potion. It was probably like a cherry blossom flower essence in like a rose cordial or something. And I went over next door. I was like, I think I was like on break or something. I was like, knock, 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 And I was like, oh, so like, I have this like thing, but like, no worries if not. And she was like really nice. And she was like, oh, okay, cool. So they were my first account and they sold like everything that I was making at the time. And that was really exciting and validating. And then, yeah, just kind of like rinse and repeat. And so in the beginning, in the early days of Instagram, guys, there weren't a lot of herbalists, if you can believe that. There was like one generation of, me, maybe like 50 to 100 people who were like selling things and all became friends because we were like, oh my God, me too, And like I truly didn't know anyone who was into herbs when I started my business, when I started my schooling. Like I didn't know anybody. So it was really like me and like all of these people who became friends at herb school, but like we're all from different backgrounds for me, which is great. Like I think that's so special. Especially because it was in Alabama, like it's very different depending on where you are. Um, the Bay Area is like obviously a hot spot, which is why how I made it out here. But um, what was I talking about? Anyway, yeah, so that's how we grew our accounts. But right, so once we had a website, people started coming to us. And also when I left my jobs and decided to focus on Wooden Spoon, I hired a graphic designer because before then it was like a combination of like friends drawing things for me and a typewriter and my very limited graphic design skills.
I love that so much. And thank you for giving us the full rainbow of your experience and your journey because it all got you here today, sharing with us this amazing product line, which I just bought your product the other day. And it was so nice to be like, oh, I love buying my friends' products so much on shelves and
Well,
supporting
thank
my
you.
friends and especially all my female herbal friends that have their products out in the world. It always brings me so much joy. So you had a certain amount of accounts. You expanded from there. You kept growing and growing while your overhead was very low. So you were able to probably
Mhm.
reinvest any profits right
Exactly.
back into the company.
So we were making quite healthy profits. And I didn't really at the time, and this is like, I'm gonna say 3 to 5 years into the business, just like incredibly profitable, probably like 20% profit at the end of the year, which is, if you guys don't know, like 3% is really healthy.
Yeah, I think Whole Foods does 9%, and it's like unbelievable
That's
how much
insane.
profit is left over at the end of the year. Yeah,
They're
exactly.
welcome. They're welcome
Yeah,
for that.
yeah.
Because that's yeah. Yeah, that's incredible. Like 9% is unheard of. I mean, 3% feels really good. 1% even, so it's really like profitability becomes this mm, ebb and flow. Profitability becomes an ebb and flow, especially when a brand or a company is in a growth spurt because you're investing more, you're investing strategically, obviously with the hope that you will, outpace in your return.
Yeah.
Um,
Can I just define a couple words. So profitability is any money after you pay yourself, after everything is paid, is left over every year. At the end of the year, it's not how much you company makes and then you pay yourself afterwards. You could do that, but that's not necessarily profitability. If you actually give yourself that money, you broke even. There's nothing left. So profitability is after you've paid yourself what you need in your salary, all that money left over. And reinvesting it back into your company means you choose not to put that money into your pocket because you're the
that's
owner.
right.
You
That's
put
right.
that money back into buying a new building or investing in a new product line or new labels, all
Mhm.
that money left over because legally you can put it in your bank account if you're the
Exactly.
only owner, or in your pocket, whatever you want to do with it. So that's the reinvestment piece. So if you keep hearing those words, I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Exactly. Thank you. I'm glad you said all of that because yeah, that's very true. And I had no concept of that, right? Like it's well within my rights. If we had profited $32,000, I could have transferred that all to my bank account. But I didn't really understand that. And so it wasn't really until 2020 that I mean, in 2019 we got approached for acquisition. So like 4 years into what I was doing. And it was by
Which
my
means
dream.
someone's going to buy the company. That's an acquisition. Yes. Go ahead.
And so it was my dream company. It was like so beautiful and exciting. And like, I mean, there's a lot of obviously details in there of just like panic of like, why would I do this? Oh my God, because it's my dream. Oh, wait, but why is it your dream? Like, so many thoughts. And so what ended up happening was not, it didn't pan out. However, it also like forced me, it could have panned out, but it didn't pan out. But it really forced me to kind of look at my why and my reason. And it was a huge crossroads for me because I was like, well, I'm getting to the point where I'm like incredibly burnout and I'm either going to like shrink this way back down so that it's just like me taking care of myself, or I'm going to like ride the momentum because right up until then we've been doubling our sales every year with no effort and just kind of like the industry growing, right? We're just like on the wave of the wellness industry. I mean, being a really early brand, kind of having our shit together, um, and I decided that I wanted to mature the business on my own. And like, what does that mean, right? Like, what would an acquisition offer me that we didn't currently have? And a big part of that was like the systems, the understanding profitability, the like clean financial picture, all of these pieces. So that was really when I decided to I invested in a business consultant, and she walked me through all of those pieces.
And then with this potential acquisition, so someone was going to buy your company and pay you a ton of money for that, and it didn't happen. Is that when you looked at starting to, did investors come to you, or did you actually pitch to investors to invest in your company?
Um, well, the acquisition came out of nowhere. The
Hmm.
acquisition came out of absolutely nowhere. So that was, and that really like kind of shook the fabric of my life, right? It was like, oh, that's the thing that happens. Like that was nowhere in my consciousness. Absolutely. Like none. I had no idea. I was like, oh, well, that means like the options moving forward are very different. Like,
Right.
oh, okay, cool. And I didn't really think much more about it. I focused on just kind of like understanding my business, understanding it as a business, understanding profitability, like I said, and cost of goods and profit margin and like all of these pieces, trying to build systems. And I also had hired my first two people. So one of them was my um, boyfriend at the time, who I lived with, who we were like out in the country, and I was like, well, I need help with production. So like he came on to do all of the production, and then I was shipping all the orders, and then we switched and outsourced the production. He moved to the orders, so I moved to like business operations, and then I hired a friend from college who had become an herbalist and like lived an hour away, and like she kind of came on and helped me do everything. Like we really were just together like brainstorming all hours of the day, doing photo shoots, doing line sheets, like so wearing all hats together. But that and so that was kind of the phase after like the maturation started, and then COVID happened, and that changed everything. It We sold out of everything overnight. As a wellness company, we sold out of everything overnight, and so I was making hand sanitizer, I was making lung syrups, I was making cough syrups, I was making, I mean, I just pivoted. We were making every immune thing we could, and really in service to like, oh, frick, people need all of this stuff. Like, we need to, like, we have the platform, we need to be helping where we can. And so we did, and we were like doing that, doing that, doing that. I was in Georgia, so it was one of the first states to get the disaster loan applications open, and so I got a loan, and then we got the I'm forgetting the name, but like the PPP loan
PPP.
that
Yep.
covered employee
Employees.
salary.
Hmm.
So that was the first time that I had gotten any cash from anywhere, that wasn't coming from inside the business, generating income. And it was because like I don't know. I like felt the energy of the moment. I felt we needed to provision ourselves, and that it was also the first time I was like required to be a very true leader and like figure out this very intense thing. So we did that. And that taught me what happens when a business has money that didn't come from the business. And so that was a huge turning point for me. Yeah.
I remember all that flow of cash
Mm-hmm.
that first year and a half of COVID, and it
Yeah.
saved my apothecary at least for a couple
Mm-hmm.
of years until we had to shut down. But it was a so it felt like such a relief, and yet, obviously, not
Still,
everything can survive on that amount of money and that overhead. So tell us then what that transition was from PPP loans, and which were, if you weren't running a company then, you didn't probably don't know the PPP was covering all of employee salaries. And if you use it 100% for employees and keep them on and not fire anyone, it will be forgiven. And they had two rounds of PPP loans within
mhm.
6 or 8 months of one another. And so really helped keep businesses afloat, especially sounds like your business. It was my business as well.
Mhm.
And tell us then how that made you change the way that you were running the business, and then move us on into kind of the investor journey.
Yeah, I don't want to go too much into the investor journey, but I will happily talk about like a nutshell of it.
Sure.
We had never spent a dollar on any outbound like sales teams, advertising, even email marketing was like really DIY. And and so all of a sudden we had all this money in the bank. And again, like this wasn't free money. This was a loan, right? So we had the PPP, which was like to keep on the people we had already. And I was not one of them because I was not a W-2 employee at the time. And we had a economic impact disaster loan from the
Yeah,
SBA. So it was a
the idle
really
loan. Yep.
it was a really low interest loan. Um, but with that, that was kind of the first time I got to like take a swing at advertising or hire anybody outside of what we could like actually just organically afford. Um, and so we invested in an email agency that I had like been connected with. And that was a really big investment at the time. And so they were like, are you doing any like ads on Facebook? And I was like, no, like, what are you talking about? And so they connected us with someone and we started running ads. And so that really catalyzed the business, obviously. I mean, that was in 2020. So 6 years ago, those ads performed very differently and they performed like extremely well. And also, apart from their performance, like we just learned a lot. We learned a lot about how to communicate with people about herbal medicine. We learned a lot about different like visuals. So, like photography, what copy worked well for people. We just really got to like test and learn a ton about our brand and about our products. And so from there, I think it came from like my business consultant at the time. Her name's Holly Howard. She's a brilliant woman. She's an absolute genius. She's like a former ballet dancer. She's about to graduate from Harvard with like a theology divinity PhD. She's just like an incredible human who also happens to like be a business consultant. Um, and I think she was kind of like, well, have you considered this path? And I worked like for a full year on getting comfortable with the idea, talking to friends who had done it, taken institutional investment, meaning like gotten money for selling percentages, shares of the business. Um, and it was at that point, Laura, really like I was again at that point of like pulling my hair out, being like, I'm done. I'm not operating like this anymore. COVID wore me out. Of course, it wore everybody out. I'm either going to like take it really small, and that's always kind of my like reactionary, like I'm just gonna take it really small or like take it really big. And I was like, again, we're just gonna keep going and we're gonna see what happens if we, raise $1 million, which we didn't all at once, but yeah, that was kind of like the goal. And so I just started talking to people and I learned that as with anything in life and business, raising money is all about relationships and it's all about building a community of people who are aligned around the same goal. And that was really cool because I feel like the people I ended up bringing on as like angel investors, which is what it's called when it's just individuals who are investing their own money versus VC, which VC means high net worth people in the world give their money to a centralized person or fund. So they all put their money into this one pot, and then there's a group of people responsible for investing that money on their behalf. That's kind of what venture capital is. But angel investors, they might write you a check for $4,000 because they have $4,000 that they don't know what to do with, and they are herbalists who, want to see more herbalism in the world. And you have a strong track record. You have strong numbers, you have strong growth, you have strong profitability, which we did, which we had all of that, right? So we weren't pitching with an idea. We were pitching with like, hey, we've been doing this. Can you help us keep doing it kind of story? Um, so yeah, that's kind of how it evolved, was just like a small investment to a bigger investment and like really stair step.
Thank you for talking about you taking a year to make that decision of whether to take on investment or not. I have friends who have had companies for 13, 14 years and still not sure if they want to take on venture capital or any investments, even
I
though
think
they're a
that's where it's
profitable
like
company, you know?
it's a really personal decision, and
Yeah.
running a business is an incredibly personal thing to do. There's so much personal growth that is forced and offered, you know, through this kind of work. And it is one of those things where it's like no one can really make that decision for you. It has, and I think that's why I want to highlight that like I was so picky with who came on board and who, what their values were and like what they stand for and like where their money came from, like, but talking to mentors who are at some of the biggest companies in the country in this industry, like you never really know who's financing them or what their profits are or how they're paying for things or where that money comes from. And that's just like the capitalist world we live in. That's just, I mean, that's just how it is. And so, yeah, I just learned as much as I could.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's beautiful. It's not an easy journey to take, but investors truly only invest in companies that have a really good record or can make them 10 times their money back within 5 to 10 years. It's a very clear rule that they have for themselves. And I've seen a number of people wanting to start a company and say, I just need investors. And I'm like, you're way too early and you actually don't know. Yeah, if that's the company that you're building, it's like you have to pay them back at some point, a lot of money usually. And so I know it's not an easy journey to say yes to, but I'm really happy to hear people were trusting you with their money and trusting you to do well with their money. And that's always a beautiful and highly responsible journey. I
And
understand that.
also, I mean, it is exactly, it's a huge responsibility. And also, I didn't come from that background, so I don't have as much qualm with like, like I'm like, well, if that's what they want to do, that's their decision, and I will do my best. But at the same time, nothing is promised. And um, being a woman, it felt very powerful. It felt like something I had to do for myself. Just like I think it's like 2% of your institutional investment goes to women, like less than
Yeah.
2%. So I was very, very excited
And
about
women
that.
have a better return and higher net worth at the end than any male counterparts of any company. And yet only 2% goes to women, which is just shocking. Ah, but it is what it is. It's really a man's world in many ways. So thank you for stepping in for all the women that want to bring on investment, have the type of companies that are out there healing the world
Happy
truly,
to. Yeah.
and being able to scale at that rate, which was really important. Yes, and I understand investors. There's no promises. I mean, they write there. You write a lot of like, this is a risk that you are willing to take. Hence, angel investors cannot actually be angel investors unless they make $250,000 a year, and not only in personal residences. It has to be additional money outside of their personal home and their value. So they don't even allow people to invest in companies that are angel investors unless they're accredited investors. So it's this risk that the SEC, which is the Security Council that manages all investments, doesn't even allow people to invest in companies knowing that it's risky. And so, like you said, you do the best you can, and people might not get any of that money back at some point. that's the risk that anyone takes of investing in a company. And it doesn't sound like that's going to happen with Wooden Spoon at all. But just to put that out there for folks that might or may eventually go down the investor journey, it is a gatekeeping. There's a lot of gatekeeping in that journey, but the more we can talk about it and make it more clear, I think the better decisions people can make.
Definitely, absolutely. I
Yeah,
think it's something that absolutely deserves being demystified because it is such a boys' club. It is so shrouded in mystery. And also, I mean, yeah, if you've done it, you've learned a lot and you've learned that it's has its phases and its fads and its own trends in so many different facets. And it's fascinating. I think it's really fascinating. I'm
it
lucky
is.
to be a part
Yeah,
of it. Yeah.
good, good. So you have grown this company and
Mhm.
it sounds like you have taken on a new CEO
Mhm.
almost just over a year ago
Just
in
over a year.
January 2025. Can you tell us about that decision and that transition for you, stepping out of the CEO role?
Yeah, so that's true. So I brought on a CEO in January of 2025, so just over a year ago when we're recording this. And I had been running the company, right? So 10 years, 10 years. I had done 10 years and I was burnt to a crisp. I was so burnt out well, I'll back up. The deal took a year or like 8 months to close. And what happened again was we Wooden Spoon launched 5 products nationally all at one time in Whole Foods in the spring of 2024. Amazing. Yay. Wow. Holy cow. Um, Most brands launch regionally at Whole Foods first, and that's because it is an extreme. Well, first of all, Whole Foods tests brands regionally before they expand nationally. They want to test for sales. It's also an extreme cost to any company to get on even regional shelves, because we're talking about 30 stores that need 5 products a piece. So that's a whole other story of like how the Whole Foods journey happened. It happened over many years. I like paused it. I went back to it. We weren't ready. We changed our packaging. We were ready. We went back to them. They passed us from regional to national buyer. In one email, they added the national buyer. I said, "Who is this?" I Googled her. I was like, "What are we doing?" And their opening order was like double our yearly inventory to date, right? Like it was
Wow,
so
wow,
exciting. It
wow.
was bonkers. It was bonkers. So I was like, of course, yeah, it sounds good. We'll do it. Sounds great. Sign us up. And then I was like, oh, okay, how are we going to pay for this? That was a whole other thing. I had to like raise, all of that money overnight just to like get on shelf, which like you don't really want to raise money to fund inventory. Not a good practice. Not really what this money is for, but sometimes you do what you have to do. So I'm making phone calls, and in 2 weeks, I had raised like $250,000 to fund this Whole Foods order. And then I realized I had done the math wrong, and I actually was 30% under their opening order, and I hadn't accounted for any single unit of restock. So it was a really hard year. It was just like
Wow.
the most stressful. We're losing like hundreds of thousands of dollars because I did the math wrong. And because I'm the only one doing it.
Yeah,
So
right.
anyway, in hindsight, ha ha ha. But like it was chaos. It was so stressful. It was just really, really, really dark and hard. And I just kept and I was kind of my team was it was a marketing person, a part-time customer care person, and a part-time wholesale manager. But I was the one who was like doing the whole deal. Like, I'm the only one doing the deal. I'm pitching to them. I'm working through the logistics. I'm making the inventory happen. Like that, I think was a huge thing I would circle in my journey of like, why was I the only person doing that? Like
Yeah,
that's where I should have brought someone else in way earlier, even from my team, because like now the person who was doing customer care then is like actually running our whole operations.
amazing. Already knows the company. You know them
Oh
well. You
yeah,
trust them. Yeah, great.
absolutely. Like is more
Perfect transition.
so capable of doing all of this and like deserves to be doing whatever she wants. And it just bottomed me out. I was just in a really dark place. And so it was one of those moments where, like, in the 11-year journey, I was getting so many public congratulations and accolades. And like, I was actually the most depressed I've ever been in my entire life. And not because of that, but because of just the emotional impact of it all. And I had moved to the Bay Area and I was just kind of like away from my support system. It was just like a really perfect storm.
Yeah.
And I remember I had gone to Tennessee to visit my family and I got back at like 1 a.m. to my house in California, and I had to wake up at 7 a.m. the next day to drive to Expo West in LA to try to, like, do the whole circuit of like hello and like, the whole networking circuit, which is the biggest natural products show in the country. It's
It's
like all the
next week.
brands. Yeah,
Are you going?
I will
Okay.
absolutely never again will be there. But
Uh-huh.
and that's kind of my nightmare too. Like, I'm not that person. I'm not the like shaking hands kind of person. Like, I know what I'm doing. I love what I'm doing. I will tell anyone about it from my home, but like I'm not that kind of person. So I go down there and like I'm supposed to be there for 3 days. After day one, I'm done. And I remember I was driving and I called my mentor. I called two of my mentors and I was like, hey, I'm done. I'm done. I'm done with this. I'm done with my business. Please tell everyone if anyone wants to, I don't know, give me an option. Cool. But like, I'm telling you, I am absolutely finished. I was just like, I knew it in every bit of my body that I was done. And that kind of started just a whole different leg of the journey where I was exploring every single option and, went through a different M&A process that didn't, M&A is merger and acquisition again. So I went through another um, process of another dream buyer, another legacy herb company saying, "Oh yeah, we'll tuck you into our operations and you can operate as yourself, but we will manage the sales, the marketing, the money, the production, that kind of thing," which is what I was looking for in a merger. It's not financial. Very rarely is there a financial upside to an acquisition. It just depends. But that is very rare to have a financial upside. Anyway, so I was just kind of like, yeah, this has been cool. Like, I'm so proud of what I've done for 10 years. And nothing was working out. I had some really predatory offers on the table, which is like no shade to the people who absorb companies. They often, help people out and just kind of shoulder burdens and keep things going. But after the second dream company didn't work out, I just remember like driving around crying, that kind of time period. And then one day out of nowhere on LinkedIn, this guy I didn't know was like, "Hey, do you want to chat sometime?" And I could see that he had worked at that he worked at Gaia Herbs, and I was like, I just knew. I was like, this is something. I don't know what this is, but this is something. This is like something, and this is like me, like deep in prayer, just like in in release, in surrender, saying yes to exploring every option. And anyway, long story short, this person over the course of 6 months became our new CEO, and he had been at Gaia Herbs for 4 years, running all of their sales departments, wholesale, direct to consumer, practitioner. And that was not my strong suit. Like, I'm really good at marketing, brand. I'm good at finances. I'm good at, there's a lot of things I am good at, formulation, but the sales part was hard for me because I'm not like a pitcher. And so it seemed like a really kismet thing. And he came on a year ago, and that transition year kind of rocked my boat really hard, as you might imagine, going from like my baby of 10 years, that was my entire heart and soul, to like suddenly being like, what am I supposed to be doing? Like, and giving everyone my ideas and them just kind of being like, we don't know who to listen to, like what? And so we had a really, clumsy, graceful transition, or clumsy, and they gave me a lot of grace transition year. And now this year feels a lot more clear cut, where the team is incredible. Our CEO is amazing. Like, everybody, the culture is so much better for it because he has more space and experience running teams. And I get to do what I love, which is education and formulation and kind of just like making sure the brand stays true to its heart and soul, which is what why people love it in the first place.
I could just listen to your stories forever.
Yeah.
And I just want to give you a very big virtual hug of you were in the Bay Area and I did not know how hard this last couple of years were for you. So I'm so pleased to hear you are maybe not 100% on the other side of that, but really close to being on the other side of that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the things are panning out better and that your prayers were answered and things are looking more calm. The waters have calmed a little bit around you.
Yep. I know. It's a one in a million story, I feel, and I'm infinitely grateful and I only attribute it to trust and surrender and saying yes and also just like trusting my body when to tell me when things are concretely true. Um,
Yeah.
and to the I mean, like I feel and I've always felt that I'm just a vessel for this thing to come. This is not because of me. I promise you. I worked hard and I gave it all of my love, but like is truly been channeled through me and that's why I don't have any like egoic grip on it.
Mm.
I think. Hopefully.
It's interesting that you say, like, all right, your identity too. It's like you're
Mm,
transitioning out of that identity, and it's so easy. It's very common. It's probably the most common thing that we identify with our business. They become our id, right? Our super ego. And that I say that running a business is the most important spiritual journey you'll ever go on because
yes.
it brings up all of your shadows, all of your blind spots, all of your criticism,
Mhm.
inner criticism, outer criticism, how you were raised, how you see money, how you see success. You have to face all of it to be successful
Yes.
and to stay in one as one person, stay like healthy, truly.
Yeah.
And you just shared all of your journey with us, which is deeply spiritual, deeply transformative. You've gone through the alchemical transformation multiple times in the
Mm,
last 11 years, and I'm sure there will be many more as well. But I'm really happy you're sharing all of that with us because I think the inner workings of running a business, I mean, the life is not for the weak, that's for sure. But entrepreneurship, at least at your scale, is definitely not for the weak. You have to be willing to see it all and hold it
you do.
all and manage it all.
And you're
Yeah.
going to come up against your biggest fears
Mm.
all the time. All the time, whether that's being seen, whether that is financial, whether that is dealing intimately with other people's livelihoods. Like that is not something to take lightly, right? Like, you as a caring, empathetic person, you have a unique role in running a business. You have a unique opportunity to make it a beautiful, creative, healthy place for people to be. And that takes so much care and thought and energy. And it's a lot to juggle. It's a lot to juggle. Um,
Mm.
but but it's fun, right? It's worth it. It's, you know, if you are willing to be that channel, it can like bring you so much beauty and
Mhm.
expansion.
I love that. So we're going to open it up to the room soon, but I would love to just hear from you. What is next for Miss Lauren Haynes? Whether it's in Wooden Spoon or not, I would just be curious what you're focusing on for the next year.
My next year is focusing on, I just moved in with my partner and we're getting married in two, 3 months from like this week. So
Congratulations.
thank you. Yeah. So we've been able to kind of focus on our beautiful small wedding and yeah, having a family. And that's kind of the next chapter for me and supporting. I mean, I'm still, involved with Wooden Spoon and still driving products there and education ideas, but I'm craving stillness. I'm craving spaciousness. I'm craving gardening, and being with plants and taking pictures of them and writing poems for them and seeing what happens with all of that.
Thank you so much, and very deep congratulations on that exciting journey.
Thank
Next
you.
stage.
you've seen a lot of the SOS moments, I feel. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure there's plenty of wonderful moments inside of all of that as